All right, hello everyone. So welcome to the fifth webinar in the series, Proactive Classroom Management. It's currently December, so Christmas isn't far away. It's pretty exciting. Anyway, let's carry on with it. For those live, this recording will go on to the training, the BFITS training classroom for the resources there under Google Classroom. Get started. So for today, introduction is what we're going to come up with first. So here's on the agenda, the introduction, talking about proactive versus reactive classroom management. We're going to be focusing on proactive today. The components of the webinar here, proactive classroom management, it's a big topic. You could talk about quite a lot of things. So we've broken it down into what we can fit into an hour, and there's touching on a few points from these different areas. And at the end, we can have a bit of a discussion to talk about anything that maybe we didn't get into great detail on, or something we maybe want to expand on further, anything at all. And there is, in the middle there, it's a frequently asked questions section. We've got a few preempted answers for you. All right, so introduction, first of all, proactive versus reactive classroom management. So I suppose I could say at the start, classroom management is all about keeping your students on task, stopping disruptions and making sure that the students are productive in your classroom. So how can we do that proactively? Well, proactive classroom management is about preventative measures, essentially. So anticipating potential issues or problems that will come up during the class and creating a structured, positive environment to prevent these things from occurring. So putting things in place before potential misbehaviors have happened or are going to happen, so that you can increase your chances of having a good lesson. And reactive classroom management, which we'll actually get into next month, is about addressing problems after they've arisen. So how can we resolve the issues once they've appeared? So that'll be next webinar. All right. So the benefits of proactive classroom management. Well, if you increase your proactive classroom management, you increase your effectiveness of your lessons, essentially. All right. So more effective lessons. That's the aim here. Now, managing proactively, so having good proactive classroom management, it contributes to reduced disruptions within the class. So you can stay on task, right? Keeping those students engaged, increasing their engagement level, getting them involved a bit more. And it generally just makes a positive learning environment. So we'll learn a little bit more about that now. So the aim of the proactive classroom management, you could say, is to have a positive learning environment for the students and, for the teacher who's within that environment, creating that and sustaining that environment. So first of all, you want the students to feel safe and comfortable in that environment, right? We want to be very positive in that sense. So you need to be a positive role model for that, okay? We'll talk more about that coming up. You need to foster inclusivity for all your students, okay, as a whole within the classroom, so that they all feel like they're included. This builds trust and rapport with your students. And it also lowers the stakes for taking risks for the students, so they can participate more eagerly or readily. And hopefully you might see some students like this, right? You'll see some smiling faces and hands up, ready to engage or participate in the classes. Okay, so predictable and stable. You want your learning environment to be these as well. Now, ensure you're consistent. That's something that is true for many things. So I've got this key icon here because consistency is key. We know that it covers across all things really in life. If you want to see some progress in exercise, you need to be consistently working toward it. If you want to learn a new skill like picking up an instrument or learning a language, you need to consistently be working at it. Classroom management is the same. If you want to have a positive learning environment, you need to consistently be working towards it. Okay? Part of that, for predictability and stability as well, is establishing a good routine. Okay? Again, we'll talk more about that soon. This increases the efficiency of your classes. So if you've got routines that you can rely on, the students know what's coming up. It makes it a lot easier for them to move from task to task because they're familiar with that kind of task already. Now, it'll also increase the greater focus on studies. So if we're moving from task to task, gives less opportunity for them to lose focus as you progress. Now, you're going to continue to see this key icon that throughout the rest of the webinar. That's because consistency really comes through everything within classroom management. The more consistent you can be, the greater impact you'll have as you go on. It's kind of like interest. It sort of compounds. If you can be consistent, it becomes beneficial further on. So, proactive classroom management, specifically building positive teacher-student relationships. So this is one of the components we're going to talk. Now, a positive student-teacher relationship and consistent effort to build. So you've got to start off maybe not knowing these students. Once you have like a new semester, a new class, you come in for the first time. You don't know them, right? And that can happen every year, right? You get new classes every year, and it takes time to build these relationships again. Right? You can start with open communication, like encouragement, positive encouragement and reinforcement and support. Great ways to start that process. And eventually, if you're consistent with that and everything else in your classroom, your students will start to feel safe in your classroom, right? That could be like, you're consistently being fair when you're disciplining students in the classroom, right? So your students will come into your classroom and they'll know, like, they're not going to get picked on by the teacher or something. They'll speak, the teacher, you will be speaking to them fairly and disciplining, the whole class as a whole, fairly. And so they'll feel safer in the environment, right? And that eventually builds trust, which is great to have. And eventually you'll have a relationship that has mutual respect, empathy, and understanding. And that makes everything a lot easier. All right, so let's get into it. The benefits of building these positive relationships. So first of all, we can say it lowers the communication threshold. When they feel comfortable talking to you and having a professional teacher-student relationship with you, then you've got students feeling at ease when they want to engage. They've got a question they want to ask, they trust you, that you're not going to shut them down for that question, right? You're going to take it seriously, sort of thing. They're asking for help, or maybe they want to give some feedback. And so an example of that might be, hey, teacher, the font on this slide's too small, right? A student who can't read the font, right? If they don't trust you, they don't have a good relationship with you, they'll probably just ignore it and just won't even try that class. If they have a better relationship with you, maybe they'll actually speak up and say, hey, can you fix it so I can actually learn? Okay. Improved conflict resolution as well. So a good positive relationship with the student makes it easier to resolve these conflicts. So keep the students on track, resolve student disputes between students, right? And to discipline students as well if necessary. Now, it's kind of the same with anything. If you're out to dinner with maybe some co-workers or something, and there's a co-worker there who you probably don't know that well, maybe you might say hi to every now and then, but you don't really have a good relationship with, just neutral relationship. And maybe they say something inappropriate to someone, maybe the server, like the host or the server, or just someone else. You might say nothing. You might just ignore the situation, or you might actually say, like, hey, that was a little bit inappropriate. Sort of why did you sort of say that? Maybe you might find it difficult to approach that conversation. If you're out with your friends and one of them says something inappropriate, it's a lot easier to handle that situation because you're good friends, right? You might be like, hey, like, what the heck was that? Like, that was weird, man. Like, you shouldn't say that. You could actually be more direct with them. Same is true with keeping students on track or keeping them focused or resolving their issues. If you have a good relationship with them and they trust you, I'm not saying buddy-friend relationship, but if you have a good teacher-student relationship, you can speak more plainly with them. Or sometimes you can even just use non-verbal cues, like give them a disapproving look, and they'll take that and get back on track or focus or whatever the situation is. So it just makes things easier. in addition to making things easier to resolve that conflict, it also increases your job satisfaction, right? Think about maybe a teacher who has 50 students in a class and they've got 20 classes and they only see them once a week, each class once a week. They're not going to be able to build as many meaningful relationships. So potentially don't get as much job satisfaction out of it. Whereas a teacher who sees one class very regularly from day to day, gets to know their students a lot better, they'll feel a lot more, attachment in a professional sense, right? It's a lot more emotional when you help them graduate for the year, and that's a good thing because it means you get something, an actual benefit. You feel like you're getting something out of it. So being able to build that relationship, regardless of, what size classroom you have, etc., is better for you as well. You get more meaning out of your job. And it also just makes your job a little bit easier, right? Easy to make effective lessons. So when you know your students, it's easier to identify what kind of activities work for them, what their interests are, and how you can put that all together. Might also just expand on this as well and say, if you know your students like Taylor Swift and you make an activity that's all about Taylor Swift, if the students like you, they'll be like, oh, wow, teacher did this about Taylor Swift. That's really cool. Like, that's fun. But if your students don't like you or don't have that respect, you don't have a relationship with them, potentially doing something like this can improve that relationship. They'll be like, oh, hey, teacher's not too bad after all. But if you have a rather negative relationship with them, maybe you always, just have a poor relationship, then potentially they'll take that and they'll see that you did something cool and they're like, oh, teacher's trying too hard to be cool. Like, what is this? So just having a better relationship makes things just easier, right? Well, it goes for everywhere, I suppose, not just teacher students. Let's continue on. Now, how can we build some positive relationships, right? So first of all, learn and use your students' names. This is like, I don't need to say too much on that. That's number one. You can't really get to know your students that well if you don't know who you're talking to, okay? And when you use their names, it helps you remember, and they also get to recognize that you know them and you identify them, and they're not just some random person. It's showing that you know who they are. Right? Now, being available is quite important. Being approachable, so even if you just see them in the hallway and you wave hi or say hello or something like that, actively listen to them. That's another way you want to demonstrate how to do that as well, and making time for them if necessary. I think that's really important. It shows that you value looking after them and supporting them. If they want to speak to you for whatever reason or something like that, make the time for them. Showing empathy, validating students' emotions by acknowledging their experience and offering support. So this could be, maybe they're actually having a dispute. And we'll actually talk more about this in reactive classroom management. But these are things you can proactively do. You can show this empathy. You can say, hey, I realize this situation is frustrating, or you may be feeling sad or angry or tired or something like that. So acknowledging and stating what those feelings are that they're having, and then offering your support can be helpful. Even if they don't take the support, offering it still shows that empathy. Positive reinforcement. So regularly praising students for efforts and achievements. We'll talk more about praise a little bit later on as well. And involve them in decisions. Give them that opportunity to make the decisions or be autonomous. They sort of appreciate that. Depending on the age level of the students, that may look like letting them work out the whole project for themselves for someone who's a little bit older, or it might be giving them, for younger kids, maybe the choice between two different rewards, like I don't know, an apple and a music bar, something like that. Giving them a choice gives them a feeling of control and responsibility. Okay. Now, things that you could potentially do without realizing it to harm your relationship with students, and these actions can be counterproductive, even though you're not intending it to be that way. It just sort of happens, and it's just something to consider. So inappropriate conduct. So there's a bit of a spectrum here, but we'll talk about banter or maybe light put down. So like maybe sarcasm or something like that. So, and particularly in the realm of their work and what they're doing with their work. If you're having a conversation in the hallway about like football, because this student likes this team and you like this other team, and you can have a bit of a banter about how your team won or something like that. That's not talking about that. That's sort of like fine. It's just about if you're talking about the work that they're doing and being sarcastic about how much effort they've put in or something like that. That's quite counterproductive and negative. Private messaging, we absolutely don't want to be doing that unless it's on the BFITS Google platform about work specifically, and only in appropriate hours and so forth. And obvious favoritism. So like we all tend to get favorites because some students are just you tend to like more, whether it's a closer match for personality or just because they're just easier to work with. Whatever it is, you just don't want to be showing that and making something unfair within the classroom. Okay, always giving the wanted task for this particular student or something like that. Share that stuff around so some of the other students get a go. Even if they're not as responsible, give that opportunity to do that task or whatever it is, so that they can prove they have that responsibility or autonomy as well. So dismissing all ideas or concerns. This isn't necessarily like obvious when you do this. Potentially you can do it without realizing it. Like interrupting student responses. So finishing their sentences potentially, or just flat out telling them or flat out start talking over them about something. Let them finish what they're saying. Let them have their voice carry meaning and let them be heard. Right. So make sure that you're not interrupting them. Not answering their question. They have a question and you sort of haven't given them a real answer or no reasons as to what it is. Sometimes you can't answer questions. Maybe you want to just say, hey, that's an interesting question. You can put it back on them and ask, hey, do you want to research that and tell me what you find tomorrow? If you have a good relationship with them, that might work better. Or you can say, like, hey, I'll look that up and I'll get back to you. I'll see what we can find. And then actually follow through on that, of course. Not believing or belittling their perspective. That can come in with reactive classroom management as well, when they're telling you something and your a reason for why they're doing stuff. So don't belittle them. Come with compassion first, but we'll of course get into that next one. Now, targeting or public shaming. So you could point out a student's shortcomings, like being late or falling asleep or something like in class. Try not to make a massive deal out of it, because it's just going to potentially make them feel like you are just making fun of them in front of the whole class. That's not to say you can't pull a student up for being late or sleeping in class or whatever in this behaviour that isn't there. It just needs to be done in a more tactful way, which we'll talk about. Okay. Or being overly strict. All right, you don't want to be unreasonable with your decisions or your discipline. You don't want to hinder student expression. You don't want to intimidate or coerce them into doing things either. Okay, they're all counterproductive. It's not always so obvious. Oops. Okay. Yeah, we're going to talk about setting clear expectations here. Setting clear expectations. Well, students must know what's expected of them. If you want them to be able to achieve, if they need to have the ability to achieve what you're setting out, they must understand what's required. Okay, so very important. And that's the same goes for anything. For your job, if you don't know what is expected of you, if your manager just says, yeah, just do whatever, then you're just like, hold on, like, what's going on here? If the academic team didn't give you a syllabus and they're just like, yeah, just teach that for a bit, you'll be fine. You wouldn't know how you're supposed to do it, right? So this is why you need to make sure that they understand. Same view for everyone. Now, this is true for many aspects of the classroom as well. We can also be applying this to the general rules and guidelines for the classroom. So, you know what they're supposed to be doing, putting their phones away, potentially listening to the teacher, so forth. Talk more about rules coming up. Common routines and lesson agenda. So if they don't know what's on for the lesson, then they don't really know what to expect. So potentially there's going to be a bit of confusion there. And if there's any particular activities or projects, make sure the instructions are very clear. And you want this to be in several different modes as well, not just I'll tell them what the instructions are for the activity. Have it written down as well. Have it written down so they can look at it at another point in time, whether it's on your slides and you share your slides with them or give them a handout, something that they can refer to at a later point in time. Put something up on the wall. You know, if you've got rules and you can do that, put stuff up on the wall. But talk about that. Yeah, on the wall. Yes. Next. Okay. So setting clear expectations. Continued. How can we do that? Well, set the rules early, right? You want to have already set them by now, right? We're in the middle of December, right? So you do that early. You involve them in the process of making. So don't just tell them what the rules are. Get a discussion going. Let them come up with some ideas and so forth. They know, you know, just involve them, and then maybe you have to point out a few that they missed or something like that. But yeah, get them to do it. If you want, you can even make a project out of it and make them all make some posters, and you can put those posters up, and talk more about that kind of thing coming up. Yeah, so making it visible and reinforce them regularly, right? There's no point putting a rule there and then just never ever referencing it again. So if you say phones away at the start of class as one of your rules, as an example, and then you never remind them to put their phones away at the start of class and they've just got their phones out, then it's not a real rule, is it? You can't just enforce that only, you know, every fourth class. It doesn't make any sense. You've got to be very regular and consistent with that. Remember, consistency. Now, explain reasons. This is important. You should be explaining your reasons for things, not just for rules, but for everything in general. So describing the purpose of, you know, what the rule is, as an example, so they understand why, right? And people like to know why. So if you've got instructions or coming up a rubric or something like that, they need to sort of know why these things are important or why they're supposed to be done this way. It also teaches them how to reason, and you can help do that, and that's a really important life skill. Academic outlines. So these must be clear. Clear instructions, as we said, have it in different modes. The agenda for the lesson, they need to know what's coming up, and the rubric. They need to know how they're being graded and what you're assessing them on, or how you're assessing them. Okay? They can't meet the requirements if they don't know what's required of them. And you should be modeling the behavior you want to see. So demonstrate the expected behavior, what you expect of them. If you want them to remain calm and speak respectfully, you should be calm. You shouldn't be having outbursts, and you shouldn't be doing things that would be different to what you're telling them to do. So demonstrating those sorts of behaviors is really important, because the do as I say, not as I do, is kind of if the teacher's not really whatever, or they'll just think you're being unfair, and they don't like being they don't like being treated unfairly, of course, and yeah, it's just not cohesive, and they don't. I guess they won't trust you as much either if you're just doing something completely against what the sort of rules are saying or what the expectations are. Now, some common rules. We'll talk about this a little bit. So, being ready to learn. So these ones over here in the green, I might just say to start off with that these are more like things you should expand on. So, like, don't just say, "Hey, be ready to learn." You need to say what that is so that the students remember. And these are rules that can encompass several different actions. So being ready to learn could be the desk is clear except for your subject book and a pen, right? And maybe a water bottle, and that's it. and the phones are away. So that maybe that is everything, and everyone's sitting down in their seats. So that could be a whole package of rules in Ready to Learn. But you've explained that at the start, and then whenever you say, is everyone ready to learn? Then they should be able to, you should be able to point out those things. So your phone's away, thank you very much. So packaging them all together. Respect others, again, that's something that's sort of packaged in as well. You need to show what respect is. So that could be something like keeping your hands and your feet to yourself. One person speaks at a time, something like that. Actively listening, of course, that's very respectful. So you need, if you package in a few different rules into one, you need to expand on that. So when you say, hey, make sure we're respecting others, then your students know what it means when you say that. Okay, let me just stand this person. Okay. If you can use an acronym like LEARN, so it's easier to remember these things, and LEARN could be like listen, E could be like engage, etc. And you can really come up with anything you like, but it just needs to be, I guess, something that they can memorize and something you go over every now and then. It's quite common to see something like that in Pratom, but maybe you'll see it. You can still apply it at the upper levels as well. And acronyms are always good. Be responsible. Again, you need to show what being responsible is. Okay, and these are just kind of rules you can introduce. So they're sort of shorthanded here, like bring materials, you bring your book and your pen and paper and so forth. Hands to yourself. One at a time could also be like to the bathroom, one at a time to the bathroom, I suppose. So it depends on what you want to add to the end of that sentence. Again, I suppose that you could classify it as a package rule, but however you want to apply that. And your polite language and so forth, and trying your best. So those are all examples. You don't have to use all of them, and I highly recommend not having too many rules. This is kind of where having package rules can come in handy, because it's like chunking information, so it's easier to remember, sort of thing. So the package rules can work there. Now, I've got this big plus in the middle because notice these all are using positive language. You're not saying no talking while the teacher's talking. You're not saying no phones. You're not saying no kicking, right? You're talking in positive language, so you can sort of like encourage the desired behavior rather than focusing on what you don't. You want to focus on what's desired, and so it's more effective that way, essentially. Okay, so using the positive language. All right, what else have we got? Onto the reward systems part now. So we're talking about having a reward system. So we could have an actual system in place for rewards rather than just having randomized rewards, if that makes sense. So incentivizing desired behavior with structure. So that's where the system comes in place. You don't always have to have a system as such, but like if you want to be as effective as you can, you want to be implementing all the different possible systems, and you're trying everything that you possibly can to make things more smooth in the classroom. Now you want to embed the system, ideally, right? When rewards are woven into the class, it becomes a natural part of the daily routine. So you've got, you're handing out points or some sort of reward every class. Maybe 3 students get a piece of candy every class or something, or whatever your reward is. Or you have a point system that everyone has an opportunity to earn every class, and you go over that in class. Like you make sure that that's visible and publicly announced. So that's embedded into the class, so it becomes like a big motivator because it's always there. And there must be clarity on what system you're using and how it works. So they must know how it works. They must know how to obtain the points if there's points, the types of rewards that they can get, and how they can track their progress or see what's going on if there are like it is a. Okay. Now these are potentially some long-term structures you can use. So a sticker chart, great for the younger kids, Pratom and so forth. You have like little charts, and you put little stickers on them. These can be individual or they can be class-based. So the whole class gets a sticker as you go. Awesome. And Jay says his M1s love Class Dojo. Yes. And even I've had M3s really love Class Dojo as well. And I think I heard from an M4 teacher that it's actually quite effective That was actually an M5 teacher. So it can work even at the older ages. The Class Dojo can work at sort of all ages. It's basically just a virtual point system. They're just digital numbers, but the idea is you can give it value. You can get them to unlock certain rewards at certain points, or you can use it to kind of like turn it into an economy system as well. So an economy system, students can earn some currency with actions and spend it for rewards. And this would be great for like a math class as well in particular. Like you give them a certain amount of points and all that. And you can get them turn in certain things for certain rewards, and they get to choose. It's a bit of that autonomy as well. So it's like, oh, well, here's the list of different things I can choose from. Let me save up for this because I want that one. And we'll talk about the different kinds of rewards we can do. And Jay's also saying here, they like to spend their points to dress up their monsters. Yeah, and you can do that. And if you've got those monsters visible on your sort of screen, you can do a sort of shared screen where you have like your presentation on one half, and then you've got your Class Dojo on the other. I've seen teachers do that as well, and they can see that it's actually visible points and their monsters and everything there. So that's can be quite effective, especially when you value it, right? If you just treat it like, oh yeah, there's this thing, we can do it, I guess, if you're not guys. I've been told to do this, so I'm going to do it. They're not going to take it seriously. They're not going to care. If you're sort of passionate about it, you're like, oh, look, this one's got the one-eyed green monster or something, who wants to do this or something? Get really sort of excited and passionate about it. That helps. We'll talk about that coming up as well. Reward systems continued. So possible rewards. You could have some tangible items like some yummy snacks, right? They could be healthy, could be unhealthy, whatever sort of works. Now, you kind of might have to be careful about some of these. Some schools might have different rules around what you can do with rewards. So, always check with your head teacher and or program manager for that information. Could get some stationary items. You wouldn't be getting everyone a stationary item, but maybe, the winner of a particular week or something might get like a pen or something cool. Some badges or pins which you can make up or get purchased, through your coordinator can help with these sorts of things, getting purchases for activities. You can help them with their participation grade, because this is all about participation, isn't it? So you can boost their participation grade at the end. So if they're meeting points, there's nothing wrong with boosting their grade. Activities or group choice, so maybe they get to choose what revision activity we're going to do, or give them a choice of which group they want to be in, or some sort of choice. Give them an option there, and maybe give them like a token or something to boost a question. So maybe that means it could mean anything really. Like give them a token and they spend that token on the middle of the test and say, "Hey, help me out with this question, teacher," or something like that. You obviously can't do that for exams, and from school to school there might be some rules around that, even for tests. But you could do something like that. You could give them like a potential to gain a bonus mark or something that they can spend anywhere. It's kind of possibilities are endless. Get input for what your students want, though. Don't just like, here's all the rewards you choose, and if you're not happy with it, then too bad. Students not happy, they're like, oh, I don't really want candy. So, okay, what do you want? What would motivate you to get some points and spend it? Everyone's different. They can also have like certificates, and I don't know, they really love certificates here. So it's especially when you put their full name, not their nickname, like their full first name, last name, and you hand it to them like a nice award ceremony kind of thing. It's really quite appreciated. So you could do something like that. I know some of the Pratom teachers that I've observed do a star of the week. So they just choose a star of the week based on their performance during that week and their behavior during that week, rather, and their efforts that they've put in and so forth, and give them that star of the week on a Friday. And yeah, something like that. So I think that's really cool. They look forward to that. And you can plan that in advance as well. You know who's going to get it most of the time. The idea is you don't get repeats. They're disqualified for the next future weeks and so forth. And yeah, you can sort of do that. Lots of options. Possibilities are very endless there. Now, we also want to talk about making engaging lessons so you can keep them interested, right? It's all about the student experience. Are the students enjoying the class? Is the sound back? Jay, what do you think? Yeah, I think it may have cut out. Thank you very much, Jay, for the feedback there. All right, so I'll quickly go over that last one. So the lesson concepts, it's exactly what the students have to know and exactly what they should have learned. Now, there's not as much flexibility with that from time to time. Doing what you can is, is something you can be doing to improve the experience of the student. So we'll find out a few ways we can touch on that. And the delivery, right? The methods and techniques used to present the concept, but essentially, how are you getting your information to your students? And there's so many things involved in that, and we can have a look at that shortly. Okay, so structure, lesson structure. All right, so we're talking about having a consistent framework. That's sort of talked about in the lesson planning webinar. It goes into a bit more detail there. But essentially, following routines and being predictable creates that safe environment for your students to participate in. If it's all random and erratic, then they're probably going to be a little bit unsure of what's happening. Okay, so you want to be consistent. Yeah, it's that key thing. Now, purposeful variation. So if you want to, you can mix it up. And there are some good ways to do that. And by changing up those routines, you can spark interest, right? You can spark curiosity, which is quite important for maintaining focus and interest. So you can flip the classroom a little bit. There's different ways to do that. Some kind of involve like getting students to do homework, and then the next day they come in and they do practical stuff, but that may not necessarily work for you. So another way of what you can do, and this works for science, but you can apply it to math and maybe a few others classes. English is very flexible in general, so that's really good. But it's you start with the end problem first. You start with the practical side of it first, and you work through that with them. So we've got this problem, and you talk about the problem. You're like, oh, how are we going to? I'll give you an example. So actually, you observed this just recently. We've got a science lab, and we're trying to separate two materials. So salt and chili have been all mixed together. Let's separate these. How can we separate those? And so we're talking about that, and then we actually do the lab. We do the lab of separating this, and we do the experiment. And as we're going through the experiment, we're sort of explaining a little bit about what's happening. Eventually, you come up with a product which you've got your salt, you've got your chili separated, and it's fantastic. And then you can start to actually talk about solubility and filtrations and so forth to actually back up what the students just did, so that when they're learning the theory, they've seen the practical and they can apply the knowledge that's coming in to something they've actually seen and tangibly done, which can solidify the knowledge a lot more, rather than talking about theory, which is kind of not really sticking. Maybe initially the theory is kind of like, oh, I'm not really sure. And then they do the practical. And ideally, yeah, the practical says, hey, all that kind of unsure stuff we just kind of did, it kind of makes sense now. Yeah, I've done it. So the idea with flipping it is it keeps their curiosity there. Maybe depending on the class, you'll have the same result. They'll learn the same amount of information regardless of which way you do it. But having that curiosity can be making the class more enjoyable, right? More engaging. Okay. Now, the appropriate timings. So keeping your activities short enough so that students can focus on the task at hand, and long enough so that they aren't rushed, right? You don't want to be rushing from task to task. So depending on the time, maybe you want to set a 5-minute timer, or depending on the activity, you can set a certain amount of time, 5, 10, 15, even up to 20 minutes. I probably single activity, depending on what you're doing, you probably want to have it around that 10 to 15 mark anyway, to change energy states and to give them opportunity to, try different things and move around or stop moving around and so forth. And plan for gaps within your structure. So transition from activity to another activity, you've got to make sure you're ready. We'll talk up again, but you've got to minimize time for distractions and allow for ad hoc things to come up. So potentially a time teacher might come into your room and start talking to your students for 5 minutes, and you're kind of like, oh, okay then, there's something happening, I guess. And that just takes 5 minutes out of your lesson. So how are you going to be able to adjust for that? So plan for that. If I lose time in this lesson, how can we adjust for that? Okay. So that's all about structure. We'll talk about the content now, the content of lessons, so what they're learning. The content is not inherently exciting, unfortunately. Sometimes you've got to teach some things that you're not passionate about or you're not excited about. So providing links and context can increase your students' interest. Okay? So a link to something else and a context in which this information sits makes it potentially some more tangible interest there. So, for example, you could relate it to real-world relevance. You could create an actual story, whether it's a real, true story or a story you've made up. The students don't have to know. A case study on something that's been done. Social impact, right? So these things link it to almost like real events or something that's actually happening and matters. You can place value in that, and it sort of stories are something that I guess humans just love to listen to in general. So that helps. Okay, make it sort of interesting. You can tie it to their interests. It could be the music groups that they're interested in, internet memes. There's lots of coaching stuff like that these days. It could be sports or other hobbies. Provide some sort of link there. And it might not be. Sometimes you might get a lesson that's really easy to do that because you're talking about, you're doing an English lesson on music, right? So you get to let them choose different things that they can do about their favorite bands and other music genres they haven't tried listening to before, or these sorts of things. So it's really easy. Sometimes they're not, you don't have that flexibility, but the more you can try make some links here, the better it is, because your students will have a bit more investment into it. Alternatively, also want to be looking at your difficulty level of your content. Okay, so if it is too difficult for them, they're going to be disengaged, right? So it's not going to be interesting to them because it's just too hard. Right? They're put in the too hard basket, and it may be one of those things that the older generation always says about the younger generation, but they probably give up a lot easier these days than kids would in the past, right? But so you want to make a scaffold. You want to make these steps small enough so that they can understand what's going on at each step and follow along appropriately. And you want to provide a sufficient amount of support at the start so that they can make their way up that knowledge set of stairs, right? Okay. And now next we want to talk about the delivery of the lesson. So the presence of the teacher. So we're talking about the tone, the volume, the pace, and all sorts of variation with the voice, right? You don't want to be monotone, right? You don't want to have the same volume all the time, but it still needs to be an appropriate volume that the students can hear and so forth. You need to make some variations to keep things interesting. And the pace must be appropriate such that they can listen, especially as English second language learners. Okay. The open body language and free movement, again, you can't just be standing there in the corner of the room pointing at the slides. You need to have some movement, and the free movement means so you can go and do some classroom management, and we'll talk about that more next webinar, the reactive classroom management. So moving around a little bit more should help with some of that. and bring some enthusiasm and passion into it. If you don't care about the subject you're teaching, maybe it's a particular sub-subject or subtopic rather that you're not really that enthused about, or you don't really know that much about, you still have to have some sort of passion for teaching. Find some value that you can have in it, whether it's you've created really nice slides, so you're excited to show the students what those slides look like or something. Find something to take on some passion and amplify that so that it so that it can be visible and seen. Try not to be fake about it, but sometimes you do have to be fake it till you make it, right? So do your best to put on a brave face like that. And the design of your delivery should be purposeful, right? So you should plan out some concept check questions. If you've got your slides going, then every few slides you'll have a concept check question where you actually check in. Hey, who can answer this? All right, this is from 2 slides ago. Who can remember it? Something like that. Cold calls and students, or maybe loop that back into your reward system. So your concept check questions, if anyone can answer it, they get a reward. So that works. Student interactivity and autonomy. So actually give them opportunities to work with each other. You can't just have them listening to you the whole time. They need to work with each other, and they need to have some autonomy with making decisions as well. So include that into the design of your lesson. From teacher T, not easy to fake enthusiasm. Students can reteach as well. I agree. You need to have some sort of sincerity. And that's why I'm sort of trying to say, find something to be passionate or interested or enthusiastic about. So when maybe you just don't really like teaching the quadratic equation, but maybe you're really proud of the way you've done your animations on the slide, so it explains the concept, right? So find something that's interesting to you and latch onto that and use that as like your guideline for showing that enthusiasm. But yeah, it's really hard to fake it out of nowhere for no reason. We're not all necessarily actors. Even though honestly, I do make a lot of comparisons between teaching and acting. So do the best that you sort of can. And that's why a lot of actors actually do method acting, where they put themselves in that position of that character that they're portraying. So for you need to put yourself in a position where you do find some sort of interest in what you're teaching. So finding a way to make that interesting as well. Whether that's maybe you include a video from one of your favorite YouTubers or something to add in there, or you put a funny meme in, or you add your humor to your presentation so that you're interested and you can't wait to sort of share that with the students. Finding something is really important. Now, the way you design, multimodal and applied. What I'm talking about here is you want to be again with the audio and the visual. So you're talking about the rules right before, and then you also have the rules visually written out so people can see it. Well, that's the same sort of thing here. The way you're delivering your lesson, are you just talking to them, or are they just reading? Have you got pictures that illustrate the concept? Have you got the voice, someone saying it, whether that's you or you've got a recording, and have you got an opportunity for them to play with it if it's something like physical they need to do, kinesthetic? We also talk about reading and writing. Are they writing about it or reading about it? All these different types of modes of learning you need to be able to include. And just applying knowledge. Are they able to apply that knowledge as well? Okay. Now, we'll talk about the physical environment, and then actually the last one before frequent amounts of questions and then Q&A. So, organising the physical environment, we've got the seating plan. Now, I know you don't necessarily have control over where the students sit, because a lot of the homeroom teachers do some of this thing, but there are ways around that. So, and the seating plan, as you'll know, can make a huge difference on how students behave during a class. So, number one I put here is build good relationships with the homeroom teachers. So maybe you can have some sway into what the seating plan looks like. Have a good relationship with them. There's sort of different ways to do that, I suppose. We can talk about that at some point if anyone's interested. Or you have a seating plan just for your lessons, which you get them to work into. I've done that as well. So they all stand up for your lesson and move around. Now, if that takes a minute for them to do that, then potentially you're actually getting time back because you don't have to tell them to listen every 5 minutes, right? If it takes a minute to get them in those seats, maybe it's worth it. And if you've got a couple BFITS teachers teaching the same students, then maybe you all want to band together, choose a seating plan, and speak to all the BFITS teachers who teach them and lay that out with them, and just make it consistent. Because that way, it's not just your class; it makes it a little bit easier for them to remember, because it's all the BFITS. It's the English, math, and science, for example. Assign specific areas for groups to work. So when they're doing some independent practice, you can be like, okay, this group's here, etc. You can get them to make use of floor space. You could rearrange the desks in different ways. So you could get them to work more collaboratively in like a circle around a desk, or like a series of desks that are sort of formed in like a little square or circle or something like that. You can even, depending on the school and what's available and what's allowed and so forth, try get them to external areas. Like if your subject, it makes sense to, you could go outside and go to the gymnasium if it's free, or obviously science can go to science labs and so forth. So doing something like that can be a bit more interesting, a bit more fun. And be aware of specific students' needs. So if there's students with glasses or someone that needs more special attention, maybe you need to put them in certain areas where you can speak to them so they can see, or whatever the case is. Now, adding to the atmosphere as well. All right, adding to the environment, like the atmosphere of the classroom. So the auditory thing is actually quite important. Okay? You can add so much value just by including this audio element. So you can have appropriate sound bites. So this could be like, maybe you're a geography teacher and you're teaching India, and maybe you have some background noise of like busy Mumbai street, or maybe you show their flag, you show like the capital and all this on the slide, and then you've got like, it plays the national anthem, just in the background for a couple of seconds, something like that. Or like you have the sound of like the national animal or something like that. Like you can just add these sort of things, and it creates a more immersive environment. Background music. So this could be when they're working, in individual work or group work or independent practice. Play some music that they like. Maybe some Taylor Swift again, if that's one of their favorite bands. Put that on, or something else. Other comforting sounds. So maybe just background noise, background sort of white noise sort of thing. Can enhance learning, classical music sort of thing, but whatever sort of works. Visual atmosphere, so relevant posters and all that, if you can do that, even if maybe you've got to put a poster up every time you come to class because you're not allowed to make modifications to the classroom, that could be helpful. To bring your poster up, put that up every time, something like that. Other resources, learning aids you can put around the room, right? And making sure not only for just nice things to have around, but if you've got instructions for a task, make sure your slides have those instructions there so that they can refer back to them. Even though you've told them, even though you got them to repeat it back to you, you still probably need to have the slides saying what the instructions are. Just have them remain there on the board or the projector on the slide, wherever it is, the whiteboard's fine. Okay, helps, those visual moments help. Now let's talk about some frequently asked questions. So do we have any tips for remembering student names? Yes. So and study. Basically, it will come naturally over time, but only to a certain percentage. You've got to put in effort. You've got to try as many things as you can. So get students to put nameplates up. That can be for multiple teachers. They all have nameplates for all teachers, for all classes at the start of the semester or so. Say their names as much as possible, as we sort of talked about earlier. Put in names in the seating chart. So get a seating chart like this and put their names. And I like to put their numbers as well, just so it helps just remembering a few things. Put them all in the seating chart so you can memorize the seating plan. So even if you don't know their faces and to the name yet, you memorize the seating plan. Oh, they're sitting in that seat. Their name must be Minnie, right? There you go. Boom. So it sort of helps. It helps me because I'm a more spatial kind of person. But yeah, those things can help. Have a conversation with them if you're more a person that interacts with people and sort of gets to know people that way. Have a conversation with them. Do memorization drills. So like, okay, you go through all the names. Okay, number one's Clun, number two is Pun Pun, number three is Pimi, that sort of thing. And I actually still remember my students because I went through and did memorization drills. Link to identifying features. So you could be like, Mini with the round glasses. So you remember them that way. Or you say vintage with the cool jacket. Okay, and so you sort of so that it sort of makes sense. So you're like, this kid has the cool jacket. Must be vintage then. You sort of remember that. You can make a song or a rhythm, like those sorts of memorization skills. They can come in handy. All sorts of things. At the end of the day, it just takes effort. You got to put it in. And I like if I'm on the treadmill, like I might just do a memorization drill. You know that. Like what else am I going to be doing? I could listen to music, sure, but I mean this is going to make the day easier at work. So I'm going to just do it. All right. Number two, how can I have smooth transitions between activities? All right. So expected routines and clarity. So they know what to expect. They know what's happening. Makes it smoother. We can go from one to the next a lot easier. And have everything ready to go, of course, whether that's instructions or materials that you need for the activity. Make sure they all have that ready so it can be transitioned through quickly. Make it a competition. Who can get to their group first? Or who can get back to the desk first? Something like that. So make it a competition. You could provide a countdown in that, and of course you can link that to rewards. Great job. I can see these ones are already, this group is already put together. Well done, you, and you. And actually use their names because you know them by now, and something like that. So these sorts of things can help those transitions. How can I use positive reinforcement effectively? You want to the desired behaviors must be defined. They should know what those desired behaviors are, right? Otherwise, how can they behave like that? You have to tell them. Right. Now, you need to be specific when you praise as well. So this positive reinforcement you're giving, be specific, untimely. So when they do it like when they do something good, praise them immediately and tell them why you praise them. Let's give an example. Okay, so the students, I don't know, to something basic. So a student who has usually not really sort of been behaving appropriately, maybe they come over and they ask for permission for something, and usually they wouldn't. So they ask permission to go to the bathroom, let's say, and then you say, "All right, thank you, great job for asking permission. I appreciate that." So giving them an actual reason why, and being thankful, that sort of thing is good. Use of a variety of reinforcement, so don't just rely on the one. You kind of want to have a few different things. So you've got praise, you've got different types of rewards, you can have different systems in place, that sort of thing. Always good to have a variety of reinforcements, not just relying on the one. Okay. And actively look for opportunities. So don't just think, when a student does something good, I'll just say something then. Actively look at each session, each lesson that you have, so that you can be praising. You can always be seen being positive about what they're doing. And private and public delivery. So you might want to think about that. Okay, are we going to compliment the student publicly? Great. Maybe they might feel a little bit embarrassed though. So was that a good idea, or was it great? Maybe they feel recognized, and that's a really good thing. So depending on the students as you get to know them, and private delivery can be quite. And I'm not saying corner them in some private room or something. That's like not what we're talking about here. We're saying we want to privately, as in have a one-on-one conversation. So it can be in class in a public space, but you're telling them directly. So you're saying, "Hey, I really like your assignment that you turned in the other day. You had some really creative ideas. The idea about the da 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 da," and then that's a one-on-one conversation, and they will appreciate that more, because I guess it means a little bit more when you just talk to them and you spend the time just to actually tell them. And reward effort and improvement, not just achievement. Achievements are great, of course, but efforts and particularly improvements, it's a great way. If you see a student who's usually slacking off and they're doing a bit of work, even if it's not as much work as you would like, it's still an improvement, right? So make sure you praise that. Okay, great. I can see you've done some awesome. Try not to be sarcastic about it. Don't come across sarcastic, but genuinely, praise them if they're doing some work. If you're seeing some improvement. And that's it for the frequently asked questions. It's a bit of a thing. I forgot to put in the Q&A slide, but if you'd like to have a Q&A now for those who are attending live, we can do that. Otherwise, thank you very much. Appreciate everyone attending. Thank you, Olivia T. Who else joined a little bit late? Alan, Daryl. Thank you for coming when you were available. And of course, we're all here. Jay, thank you for letting me know the microphone was working. Thank you, Jamie and Roy. Really good to see you, Marjorie and Giselle too. So thank you very much, guys. Catch you next month. You can always reach out anytime if you've got anything to talk about.